Okay, we'll see if we can make this work. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about taking that format that we've already worked with, writing, so in connecting that to the persuasive essay that you're going to write for this particular assignment. So you've already done the research. You were asked to look up a god or goddess, a hero, and a monster, and you were supposed to look for information that's going to help convince your reader why this god or goddess, this hero, or this monster is the best of all the ones in Greek mythology. So it's not about gathering as much information as you can, it's about gathering the right information. When we write persuasive arguments, we have to remember what persuasion is. It's an argument that is designed to convince your reader that your point of view is worth considering. It's not to convince them to change their mind, but they should at least think about it. So when we have a good essay, we have certain things. Facts are established. In this case, that's why you have to have multiple sources to establish that what you are saying about your god or goddess, your hero or your monster, is actually repeated by multiple sources, therefore we can consider it fact based on our topic of Greek mythology. It's a little bit of an oxymoron. Mythology is, not really based in fact. You prioritize or sequence the facts to build your argument. So you want to start with your strongest fact or your weakest and build to your strongest. You have to decide. You're going to form and state your conclusions. You're going to persuade your audience that your conclusions are based upon agreed upon facts, and that's where this comes into play with the multiple sources. That's why you are required to have 3 separate sources for each of your 3 topics for a total of 9. And then have confidence in what you're saying. Not only do you need to have confidence in what you're thinking, but it has to come through in your writing. It has to demonstrate writing with confidence. So we always start with the introduction, where we introduce the topic, inform the reader of our point of view, and then we want to give the reader something to continue reading the essay. And then we always focus on the number 3. If you stick with 3, you can't go wrong. You want to make sure that the body of the essay has flow. Keep your voice active. Don't slip into passive voice. You're trying to convince the reader, so keep it in an active voice. Quote your sources to establish authority. Stay focused on your point of view throughout the essay. It's really common in persuasive essays for people to birdwalk off on other topics. And stay logical. Don't lapse your essay into the summary. You want to wait for your conclusion to kind of wrap things up. So don't start summarizing your knowledge base at this point. Your conclusion then often concludes your argument by summarizing the points that you've made. It refers back to the introduction as well as the main points, and it logically concludes the argument. The only way that you're going to convince somebody is to apply to their logic that, yes, I guess this does make sense when you point these things out to me. You have to have a bibliography because you are citing, you have used references to come up with your opinion. So all sources have to be listed. We have to use MLA format to cite our sources. And revision is very important. Ask yourself the question after you've read through it, does this make sense? Number 1, does it follow a logical progression? Number 2, can I convince myself? If your writing doesn't convince you, it's not going to convince anybody else. And then ask yourself the question, will my audience agree with my facts? Do they make sense? Are they logical? Can they? It's oftentimes you can get an audience, your reader, to agree with you. I agree that your facts work, but you're not going to change my mind. Other things get in the way. That's why persuasive writing is so important. You're living in a world of persuasion more so than ever. If you don't believe me, watch the ads on television. One more thing you need to know is you have to know what you are talking about. You have to have enough information in your background to understand what you are talking about. I've had you read a lot of Greek myths. We've looked at a lot of different things. You should have enough background at this point to feel confident about what you're talking about. Don't get lazy with your facts. We talked about multiple sources. So it's simple, right? Well, how does this apply to the Power of the Gods paper that you are writing? The format of this persuasive essay will follow what you have already written before. All right, so it's simple. You start with your introduction. You'll need to begin with an interesting lead sentence. Think about the god or goddess, the hero, or the monster that you have chosen. Fall back on one of the Greek myths that may have them in the story. Give us something to hang on to, something that goes, cool, I want to hear the beginning of that, the rest of that paper. Chris?
Should we have all three of our characters in introduction sentence, or just one?
Well, when you introduce a paper, don't you want to give a reader the idea of what the paper is going to be about? So the question was, I'm just repeating so it can be heard on the videotape. The question was, do all three characters, your god or goddess, your hero, or your monster, be stated somewhere in the introduction? And then my answer was, it's always a good idea to give the reader a preview of what's going to be in your paper. So you have to either state them by name or somehow allude to the fact that you're going to be dealing with all three of them. Okay? Your thesis statement will be the last sentence of the introduction. And remember that your thesis statement is your position on the topic. Zeus, Hercules, and Medusa were the greatest elements of Greek mythology ever. You state your position and explain to them that they are the best. Then comes your reasons. Do you remember the cowboy analogy? The rodeo? Well, in that paper that you wrote on the school issue, each paragraph was a separate reason. This paper is going to look a little different. You're going to have longer paragraphs, but you're going to have 3 paragraphs, but the first paragraph will be your god or goddess. The second paragraph will be your hero, and the third paragraph of the body will be your monster that you have chosen. Where's your level of understanding at this point? Within each paragraph, then, you have to have your 3 reasons or your evidence that you have chosen as to why they are the best. So you're going to need a topic sentence followed up by 3 reasons and evidence to back that up. Zeus was the best because he carried a lightning bolt. Well, what did he do with that lightning bolt? Give us some evidence to back up your fact. Don't just state the facts. So what I don't want is 4-sentence paragraphs where you just name the god and give 3 facts about them. For every reason that they're the best, there has to be evidence to back that up. So these are going to be quite lengthy paragraphs. Questions? Okay. Yes, Mason.
You need 3 reasons for each god, hero, and monster.
Yes. The number 3 is the magic number. Then you have to have a paragraph with your counter argument and your rebuttal. The next paragraph will need to be that point. So you have the introduction, that's 1. The 3 paragraphs, god and goddess, hero, monster, that's 2, 3, 4, and this is paragraph number 5. You with me so far?
So, the rebuttal and counter argument are for all 3 of them together?
Yes. You don't have to defend each one separately. You can defend the group. So you're going to anticipate the opposing view. You're claiming that Zeus, Hercules, and Medusa are the best, but somebody else in here is going to say, no, 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 no. It's Poseidon, it's Perseus, and it's the Minotaur. So your counter argument would be, although there are many other Greek gods, goddesses, heroes, and monsters that stand out in literature or in mythology, you're going to acknowledge that, then you're going to give the rebuttal. Okay? However, these 3 have these traits, or these 3 combined, whatever you were going to come up with. Then there's a conclusion. It's where you sum up your position and connect it back to the introduction. So that little anecdote in the beginning, in the introduction, you're going to connect it back so the conclusion feels like it's coming back full circle. So now we have 6 paragraphs. How many paragraphs? 6. All right. After you're finished writing your essay, you're obviously going to check your punctuation, capitalization, spelling, and grammar. They always need to be on point and 100% correct. Make sure you double check your writing for any errors. What's the best way to do that? Read it back out loud to yourself. It's the number one way to correct errors. Have someone else read your paper and check for those errors. Remember the difference between revision and editing. Editing is looking for the mechanics. Revision is checking out how you wrote it and how do I want to change it. Does this sound the best way it can? Or can I make it better if I reword this? I am not going to hold you to revision and editing. However, I need to remind you that you've been with me long enough that I can tell when you throw in a first draft and call it your final copy. They don't read nearly as well, and I will grade them accordingly. You have to have a bibliography at the end of your paper. We talked about that last week when you were gathering your sources. You're going to use the link provided for you on Blackboard for OSLIS, which is the Oregon System Library Services, or if you want to use EasyBib. If you're familiar with EasyBib, you can use that. Mrs. Willie uses EasyBib. That's what she recommends for her students. So that's where you're going to go in. You've used it before. You pull up, this is my internet source. I'm going to type in the information it's asking me. It prints out my citation. I copy and paste it into my bibliography. What's the one thing you have to remember about writing a bibliography? It has to be in what order? Alphabetical, based on the first word. So make sure you remember that. And the indentation is backwards. You don't indent the first line of the 2 or 3 line citation. You leave the first line all the way to the left and indent the rest of them. So pay attention to that. And if you're stuck, we'll be working on it in class and I can help you. So your paper will need to have a bibliography at the end with all your sources listed correctly in MLA format. So to sum it up, purpose of this paper is to convince your reader that the choices you made are the best. Explain through your evidence why your God, hero, and monster are the best. Does anybody know why we're not capitalizing God and Goddess in these papers? Has anybody got an idea on that? They're not deities like when you're studying Christianity and you say the God of our Father or we are talking about God, we capitalize that. But in mythology, we do not capitalize the words God and Goddess. So keep that in mind when you're writing your paper.